Hello everyone and welcome to this morning's episode of Trending. My name's Gareth.
And I'm Jaymie. Today's show is brought to you by Red Life Therapy for healing at a cellular level. Head over to redlifedevices.com and use the code Ickonic for 10% off all Red Light devices. If you want any more, then there's a free webinar explaining how this technology works in the coming days, and we'll put a link to that in the description as well. Morning, Gaz. How we doing, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. I'm just thinking after the introduction, we just sort of looked at each other and it looked very well rehearsed when it wasn't.
Well, you looked at me and I just reciprocated.
Yeah.
So there you go.
No, I'm good.
It's like we like each other.
Okay, right, let's kick this off. I'm going to need a sip of coffee for this one, Jay.
I know. No one saw this coming at all, did they, mate?
Bird flu, right? So obviously they've been priming us for bird flu for a long time.
Yep.
Speaking about it all the time, even in this area where we live in Derbyshire, when you're out driving, you will see, avian flu controlled zone signs fairly regularly in the countryside. It's always kind of there. And so when I saw this story breaking yesterday afternoon that the first person in the UK has contracted, this new strain of bird flu, so it's jumped from birds to humans.
Yep.
I was like, okay, here we go. And I saw, a lot of the people talking about it online, and they were going in, and understandably, they were going in the direction of, here we go, here's another pandemic.
Yep.
Which I understand because, you've got your Bill Gates, the next one will get attention stuff. You've got them talking about how the because of climate change, we're going to have more of these pandemics. The EU signed off on 40 million doses of a bird flu vaccine in June last year. I think the UK got 6 million of them.
Yep.
So I get it. I get why people are looking in that direction, and they may well be right to do so. Personally, when I see it, I don't think they'd even be arrogant enough to try another pandemic now.
Not in the same way, no.
No, I think that actually people are they're either awake to the situation, which a lot more people are, or they're just done with it.
Yep.
So even if they're not necessarily, awake to what's going on and the more nefarious goals beneath it, I'm not looking down again, mate. I did it last time. I wore a mask last time, mate. I'm not doing it. I took your jab last time, mate. I'm not doing it. So I don't think they'll try that. But what it instantly came to my head as I hark back to foot and mouth. Now, if people remember the foot and mouth outbreak here in the UK, it led to the culling of millions and millions and millions of livestock, which destroyed farms, absolutely destroyed farms. Lots of them closed down. Lots of them then were, swallowed up. All the land was swallowed up by hedge funds and all that, the usual drill. And a lot of them that did survive are still now, best part 20 years later, still feeling the pinch from
absolutely.
it. So I think, okay, yes, I think they'd probably love to lock everyone down again and destroy the economy another way. They'd love to get everyone wearing masks, kids wearing masks in school again, destroying them psychologically. They'd love to get another round of vaccines in people as if they're not ill enough. I get that they would love that. I just don't think they can pull it yet.
Not in the same way. No.
Not in the same way. So I go, okay, so what are your other goals? Well, you don't want people eating meat. That's been made very, very clear by all of these people. And this can bill that they're trying to push through here in the United Kingdom, they make no bones about it. No meat, no dairy by 2050. And, generally they want things by 2030, which, ladies and gentlemen, is 5 years away. That's nothing. That's nothing. So you go, okay, so you don't want people eating meat. You want to destroy farming because you're doing that and have been doing that for years. The Labour Party's first thing they did pretty much when they came into power in the UK was assault the farming industry once again. You don't want people on the land. You've got these smart cities, these 15-minute cities, so you need to get people off the land. Obviously, the climate bills are talking about rewilding, but it's like, okay, but you kind of got to get people to agree to it.
Yeah.
And the best way to get people to agree to it is give them no choice by impoverishing them.
Yep.
So I think what they'll do is I think they will push, and like I say, they may well go for another pandemic. Maybe I'm way off. But in my mind, I think they will go for the culling of animals instead. So they will cull, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of chickens and ducks and geese and other poultry in the UK, which I think people would be more willing to accept. They'd certainly be more willing to accept that than another lockdown, another round of jabs and masks. But the end goal is the same, and that is the same destruction, the same as we were talking about yesterday. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy because, they will not only go for the farms, they will go for people that keep chickens.
They will, absolutely. And that's why, in America, I think if you keep livestock, you're like on a sort of a list of people to watch, people to keep an eye on. If you keep any sort of prepping material longer than a week or so, you're considered an extremist. But I think an interesting thing to touch on as well, Gaz, is you mentioned they'd love to have another round of jabs within people, they'd love to do this, love to do that. Well, what a lot of people don't seem to realise is whatever the food you eat is sprayed with or fed, that goes into you. This has obviously become more commonly discussed the last few weeks with the Bovaer story surrounding cattle and what, that enzyme that's being given to them. What about if the vaccines don't go into the people? What about if the vaccines go into the poultry? Yep. And then people then eat that poultry and in turn, cause and effect, whatever's in that jab then goes into you. And that's why it's so important. If you're going to eat meat, which I absolutely think we should be doing, if they're trying to get us to not do something, we should do the opposite. You need to make sure it's good quality, because this low quality rubbish is probably as bad as you can't, probably can't even imagine the stuff that goes into it, even now. And if they add things like this to it, then the repercussions could be huge.
Yeah, and it's another way of kind of pincer moving the people and getting the people from both sides. And I think the whole Arla thing with Bovaer is exactly the same. What you do is you get the so-called normies, the ones that would generally queue up round the block for their 17th flu vaccine. They're going to carry on drinking Arla. They're not bothered. So you're getting that rubbish into them.
Yep.
They're going to carry on, eating meat that's injected with goodness knows what. So you're going to get that into them. But then you've got another thing is those people that are awake to what's going on are going to go, well, I'm not eating that. I'm not drinking that. So then what you've done is you've got them off meat and dairy.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, you have. That's why I think, we touched on it earlier on in the week, didn't we, when we were talking about the importance of shopping local and supporting local. I don't think it's ever been more important than now to get a relationship with your local farmer, with your local dairy farmer, local vegetable producer, so you understand where your food's coming from, and that you can ask these questions. Like I go to a farm, Gareth always takes a mick at me, I always go to a farm and get raw milk, and I actually spoke to the farmer directly and said, look, seen this story, and he laughed and he went, you're about the 10th person today to ask me about this. So that's really, really good that people are more interested in where their food is coming from, because a hell of a lot of trust has gone into place in terms of giving the power away to others on that food supply. Not just the fact that supply is going to keep coming, but also what goes into it. And I think that's an incredibly dangerous precedent that history and current events show us is not one we should trust whatsoever.
No, and I think it's also, it's going to be an attack on small farms, local farms, but it's also attack on those people, like I said, that want to keep chickens or want to, be self-sustainable, or at least a bit self-sustainable.
Yep.
Because what they can do, because of a crisis, is they can then bring in legislation, emergency legislation, that would maybe stop you from keeping chickens. Or if you did, you'd have to go through a certain amount of hoops and maybe, chipping of animals, so that you can have AI, which is the obsession at the moment. AI can then predict when the next pandemic will come, and obviously if AI can predict it, they can program the AI to basically just declare one whenever they want. So people might be right to be concerned about them trying to push another pandemic. For me, I think it's more going to be about attacking the food supply, and this is a global thing, because this isn't just an outbreak in the UK. They've just had an outbreak of a very rare strain in California as well. So I mean, California's getting it from both sides, isn't it, with the wildfires as well? So, or not so wild fires. But yeah, that's my take on it. I think we should watch it like a hawk. I've written watch it like a hawk /
chicken. Yeah, that's made me laugh. But it's very true, very true. And I think, what today's show is very heavily health focused, and it's focusing on the fact that the organisations and the authorities that are supposedly there to, one, regulate the food companies, and two, protect us from, these companies being entirely profit driven and therefore not giving, two damns about the health impact of their products. Well, they don't. They're in bed with them, as we've seen and spoken about previously on episodes and made films on. But this story is one we're going to come to, which we kind of touched on a couple of weeks ago, the Zempic weight loss jab story. And the reason we're touching on it again is because it's moved on at a pace which even, I spoke about this last year before it was out, about the dangers of it. And even I'm shocked at how quickly this has come to fruition in terms of the dangers being widespread and spoken about even in the mainstream media. So we've got 3 stories here, all that tie in together. This first one's from the Daily Mail here in Britain. Warning, weight loss jabs like Ozempic linked directly to deadly cancer diagnosis within a year of using them. And it's a particular type of thyroid cancer. Now, anyone knows what the thyroid does. It obviously regulates a lot of things in the body, including emotion, but it also regulates weight. and weight loss. Hence why people that have an overactive thyroid tend to faint a lot and tend to have to take medication to slow it down. People that have an underactive thyroid tend to have issues with weight gain and struggle with weight management. So the fact that that's impacting that is not unexpected given what this jab is supposedly doing. But it's showing that we are seeing a massive rise in cancers. 350,000 patients. Now that's a massive number of people have seen their risk of this cancer significantly rise in the year following taking this jab.
Is this in the UK?
Yeah, this is in the UK. 350,000. So firstly, how many people have had this jab?
Enormous.
How many people have had this jab? 400 Britons have been hospitalised in the last week as a result of this jab. As a result of this jab. So my question is this. There must have been clinical studies on this. So surely these risks were known ahead of time. And if they were, then they were either buried or ignored before this came to market, or secondly, clinical trials on this weren't done, at which point you've got to look at the drug companies and you've got to look at the organisations that are supposedly there to regulate the pharmaceutical industries. You've also got to look at the NHS, which is supposedly the health industry that is independent from the drugs companies, where basically the drug companies should have to justify every single thing they give to the NHS, and the NHS should be so concerned that what they're putting in their patients' bodies is safe, but they're clearly not. And again, when you go to the top, the people in the important decision-making positions are in bed with each other.
There's a conflict of interest all the way
Massive
along, where
conflict
you
of
will
interest.
actually have, as an example, I remember during the COVID time, we had the chief scientific officer, Valence, had, I think it was £600,000 worth of shares in pharmaceutical companies. That's what?
I know, it's absolutely incredible. And when you've got a healthcare system based on people being sick and profits being made from people being sick, you're never going to have, and that's not a conspiracy theory, that's how the system is built internationally. That's only going to encourage people to do, dark and dangerous things, because the bottom line is all they care about.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like that old saying, the people that want to go into politics and be politicians are the last people that should be allowed to be them. Well, if you want to go into the health industry to make money, you should be nowhere near it, because essentially you should be there as a vocation to want to help people.
Yeah. Well, a patient cured is a customer lost.
100%.
And I know it's quite a cliche saying, but that's exactly what it is.
It is 100%. And this story carries on to another two. This is a study, again, in the UK, but there's some American influence as well. Doctors now fear if you've had this jab, the Ozempic one, then you'll need to take it for life because of something called fat cell memory. So essentially, me and Gaz love training and love the gym, and anyone that does understands that things like steroids, you start taking, you stop taking them, you end up in massive problems. Hence why they're massively not advised and they're very dangerous when you start taking them. This sounds very similar. Yeah, essentially, once you start taking it, you can't stop.
Well, that's a customer for life, then, isn't it?
It is, and I guarantee nobody was told this before they started taking it.
Of course not. There's other ways of losing weight, but okay, like there's this magical drug. Anything for me, if it sounds too good to be true, it's because it is. But okay, this drug's come along. I'll take that until I've lost maybe 3, 4, 5 stone. That's what I need to lose, and then I'll go back to a healthy diet. And oh no, I won't. I'll stay on it forever.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been told that.
And then the final part of this story, Gaz, you spoke about this earlier in last week when we covered this story initially. When we talk about safeguards in place to stop people getting this jab. Firstly, nobody should be having this jab, but stop people having it that, it could really risk their life. You mentioned people with anorexia, people with eating disorders that are already grossly underweight. The fact there is no safeguards in place, the fact that, it's known now to have various different side effects, also effects on the kidneys and the liver, which has not been talked about in this story. Now, again, anyone that has kidney or liver issues, whether that's various different types of chronic illnesses they're dealing with in that area, should obviously be vetted before given anything that could affect that organ. This story, again, from the Daily Mail, online pharmacies accused of treating fat jabs like grocery items. Online pharmacies have been accused of treating weight loss jabs like grocery items at a little checkout amid calls to toughen up regulation.
It's because they are grocery items to them.
They are.
It's
a profit.
It's money. Yeah.
It's a profit margin. It's not about health. It's not about looking after people. Because if it really was, and you really wanted to manage people's weight, and weight is not completely related to health, but it's very much a large influence, you'd regulate toxic foods. You'd regulate, fizzy drinks. You'd regulate hyper-processed and highly fat unnatural products that are all over the supermarkets these days. I mean, you go back like a generation or two, take like our grandparents. They walked into Tesco these days, they wouldn't recognise half of what is in there because it's not real food. It's not food that our ancestors have eaten. It's not food that we have developed, physiologically eating, and therefore our bodies are used to dealing with. And it's not food that is associated with good health. It's just toxic rubbish. And the fact that the trajectory of world health is on the decline internationally, anywhere you look, whether even in developed countries, underdeveloped countries, and everyone in the middle, that tells you something. It tells you that it's clearly done by design. And, the highlight of today's thing to highlight on today's show is that everything that these people do is always retrospective. They always come out after the fact and say, we didn't know this was dangerous. You could apply that to really big things. Smoking is obviously a massive one. Smoking's brilliant. It's what was the original poster?
Doctors were recommending it
for pregnant women as well. And then they look, then that was an advertising campaign. I remember obviously I was too young, but I remember the poster being shown of a pregnant woman holding a cigarette and the brand being, this is the choice for pregnant women, and then how many people had their lives destroyed as a result of that before they finally admitted that there was a problem. This weight loss jab, people were calling it out before it came out. Now, very quickly, they admit it's a problem. So the stories of evolving the COVID jab in the last couple of days, people 4 years ago, us and very many others, were calling out the dangers of this before it was even rolled out. And you were called a granny killer. You were called a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat, dangerous. You were silenced. You were deplatformed. And, every time it's after the event, and, one of the biggest ones that's going to happen after the event at some point is the explosion of the bubble that admits EMF radiation causes a lot of problem. That's the next smoking. But stop trusting these people. They've shown time and time again, they just abuse it.
Well, I'm hoping, because I saw this morning a singer called Avery. I think she's quite famous. I'm far too old, to be honest.
I've never heard of her either.
To know who the popular people are with kids, but she's quite popular, and I did have a look, and it's got a big following. So she made a video saying that she'd taken Ozempic. I'll be honest with you, looking at her, I've got no idea why, because there's nothing of her. But she's now got a bone thinning disease. She's got osteoporosis and various other ailments that you would essentially link with someone in a nursing home. Someone who's very elderly, because obviously our bones thin as we get older, particularly if we don't look after ourselves. And so she's made this video saying, please let me be an example. So hopefully that will be the case.
Hopefully
and
it does.
People will go, do you know what? Okay, I'm not going to bother.
Hopefully it does.
Okay, so moving on, again, health. So we've got the COVID inquiry here. I mean, I'm sort of trying to avoid calling it a COVID whitewash because we know that that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
But what I found very interesting about it was a story that broke yesterday. So Sir Chris Witty, who's the chief medical officer of England, he was obviously huge during COVID. At 5 p.m., next slide, please. He was the one that was briefing the country on following the science and all that. So he was in front of the COVID inquiry and being questioned on it. And he came out and said that he was very skeptical of vaccine mandates. And actually that the mandates for NHS workers and other healthcare workers, people working in old people's home, was nothing to do with science, essentially. It was very political. In fact, he said entirely political. Okay.
So he's taking the buck off himself.
Basically. Okay, so that's interesting. So he was very skeptical of the mandates. He says they were entirely political. He said that vaccines should have been a choice because with any drug, there are always side effects. 100% safe and effective, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
There are always side effects, and some of those will be very severe. I would consider death to be quite severe, yeah. Okay, so I looked at that, and I saw people were going, oh my goodness me, what a bombshell. And I thought, well, he didn't say anything at the time when he essentially had the nation's attention at 5 p.m. 5 days a week.
Yep.
He said nothing about the fact that he thought it was political, or he thought that actually the science didn't back up doing it, or that the fact that he felt that healthcare workers should have a choice. He said nothing. And not only did he say nothing, this is the same Sir Christopher Witty, that bear in mind, he's saying, okay, so every drug has side effects, and those side effects can be very severe. Okay, that's what he said. Why then, when the JCVI ruled that, in their opinion, with all their scientific data, that the vaccine should not be rolled out to 12 to 15-year-olds. There was no reason to do it scientifically, and there was no health risk. There was no basis in anything, basically, to roll it out. He overruled them as the chief medical officer of England, and issued it. So 12, 15 to 15-year-olds were given Pfizer vaccines because he overruled them. And they were supposedly based on the science. So those two things don't add up. They don't work. And so my takeaway from it, Jay, and I've noticed it, and we have spoke about it on Trending in the last couple of weeks, is the rebranding of people, the rewriting of history when it comes to people that the cult see as an asset. So Sir Christopher Witty is an asset to the cult. He's still Chief Medical Officer of England. I think he's been offered a very high-profile job at the World Health Organization, which I think he takes at the end of his job as Chief Medical Officer. So he's still a big player, right? And then you've got Valence, who is the Chief Scientific Officer. He is now in a ministerial role within the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party. So he's going to be rebranded as a result of this COVID inquiry. He will come out of it all right because he's still worth something to them. You look at Elon Musk, you look at Zuckerberg, they're still worth something. Therefore, they're rebranding. The brain chip guy is now the bastion of freedom. Zuckerberg, the man that was deplatforming everyone for saying anything against the narrative, is now suddenly freedom of speech guy. And then to then counteract that, you've got someone like Sajid Javid, who he's small fry. I mean, he's a former MP in the United Kingdom. Granted, he has some relevance in the sense that he's held a lot of
He's had a lot of cabinet positions.
He's had a lot of cabinet positions for a very unremarkable man. However, when I look back at those cabinet positions, he was sort of put into them at a point where he was basically, he became, for example, health minister after Matt Hancock had been fired for, whatever he'd apparently done with his secretary or whatever. So he came into a job role at not a good time. And he came in as defence secretary. He came in as home secretary under Theresa May.
Yep.
When the Conservative Party were not doing great. She was very unpopular, Theresa May. So the timing that he got these positions, he was basically out.
He's a scapegoat.
He was a bit of a scapegoat. Now, he is no longer an MP. He has no role within the cult. So he's useless to them. So within the COVID inquiry, he's being chucked to the wolves. This week, he said he had no idea that there was a yellow card scheme, which around the world is the British equivalent to VAERS, basically. It's where you would report vaccine injuries. Now, he's lying.
Yep.
Of course, he's lying. But he's being completely maligned in the media, whereas someone like Witty, Valence, and other people are having this rewriting of history and this rebranding.
When Witty is the one that made that decision. Witty is the one that overruled that. For a start, how can, in a democracy, an unelected man make such a massive decision? I mean, I should have looked at the numbers, but of how many 12 to 15-year-olds there are in this country. But it's going to be a few million. So a few million kids have had their decision made for them by a guy who's not elected, by a guy who has had by that point a dreadful track record through that whole COVID period of doing the right thing and making decisions. We'd seen computer model after computer model that were complete fabrication through that period as well. So the trust in scientific officials should have been on the floor. Yeah. And how many parents, because, I find it difficult to not have a go at the parents, but how many parents were ignorant or intimidated or just, I guess, backed into a corner enough that they just, as soon as that came out, wouldn't have even known that he'd necessarily overruled it. No. They'd have just seen it was now available and they sent their kids like lamb to the slaughter. And how many of those kids in, a few years when they get to ages that they want to have kids are going to have issues, given that, and how many of them have already had issues in terms of side effects and so on. I know of somebody personally who's a young lad who all of a sudden develops a health issue that he hadn't have before. Won't name any names because keep them private, but I know somebody personally and, their lives changed as a result. It's absolutely disgusting what's happened. And the fact that one man can make that decision and not only still be in a job, how's he not in jail? Well, how's the guy not in jail rotting?
Well, because he served his masters. He's a sir. So he's been rewarded that way. He's been given a place at the Royal Society. He is well and truly in the club. And we were talking about conflict of interest before. This guy is in the pocket for 31 million quid for a malaria drug to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, an organisation that Chris Witty was running, was given 31 million pounds by Bill and Melinda Gates. These people are always connected to the same nefarious characters.
They are, and that just shows again, stop trusting them. Whatever they say, do the opposite. Pretty good rule for your health.
There you go.
Right, final story today, again, related to health. This would have followed on quite nicely from the first story I talked about in relation to... first story that we covered in relation to, these organisations having the right to do certain things, but doing the exact opposite. So this is the Coca Cola company. Right, this is a story from Europe, essentially. It's lots of different countries are affected by this. Coca Cola recalls drinks from several European countries over safety concerns. Well, they could just do that based on their product in general, but this is a particularly extreme case. Chlorate, which is a byproduct of chlorine used to disinfect water, can cause thyroid problems, again, or kidney failure, and may be fatal in exceptionally high levels. Now, Coca-Cola has issued a recall for a significant amount of chlorate found in its popular drinks Coke, Sprite, and Fanta. Now, they're saying that apparently the levels are higher than they should be, but they're low enough that they shouldn't cause too many problems. Firstly, why is that product in there? Why is chlorate in there? Why is a water disinfectant in a drink that you are consuming? Makes absolutely no sense. And then my next question is, how's it passed the safety and batch testing, which you should have to do for any product, to go out and be on the market? And I guarantee the only reason they are starting to recall them is because people have reported problems, probably. Otherwise, how are they going to know if they've already gone out to market? This is not the first time this has happened. This is not the second time this happened. This is the fourth time this has happened in the last 3 years that they've recalled products because of different types of safety concerns having an elevated level of something. It's the second time that it's been for this particular thing, chlorate. So once again, why are we consuming these products? I'm going to put it out there and say nobody drinks Coca-Cola thinking it's good for them. They might drink Diet Coca-Cola because they think it's slightly better than Coke, but it's absolutely not a product you drink in the same way you would drink water, you would drink other, healthy drinks, thinking it's doing anything positive for you. You know it's doing something negative to your health. Even on the sugar content alone, forget all the additional chemicals and the cocktail of rubbish that goes into it. But when you've got this happening time and time again, where the safety procedures that, if we started a soft drink company now, mate, they'd be all over us to make sure everything was safe. But these companies do what the hell they want. You've got, a Diet Coke machine on the president's desk, apparently. So now that's cool again. And you've got, it's just absolutely insane. But while make America healthy again, you've got all these things going on. And Coca-Cola are one of the biggest companies in the world. I made a video last year talking about the amount of money they generate in 2 days is so significant that if the whole world stopped buying Coke, they'd be bankrupt in 2 days. So that goes to show, one, how fragile they are if people decide to hit them with their wallet, which is the best way to hit these companies, just stop buying their product. Yeah. And it also goes to show how many people must buy and consume Coke on a daily basis to generate that insane volume of money. And, you see third world countries in Africa and South America and so on, and you see Coca-Cola signs in shops, you see this, you see that, everywhere. It's international. It's all over the world.
As well, a lot of the fast food outlets are owned by the drink companies. So you would look at, for instance, say KFC. They're not Coca-Cola. If you go into a KFC, you can't get Coke, you can get Pepsi. Well, PepsiCo and the parent company of PepsiCo, they own KFC. So it's the other way around. Yeah. So they are, Coca-Cola are everywhere.
They're completely addictive, these products as well. And they have obviously a chemical concoction in them, as do many of these highly processed foods. But soft drinks are one of the biggest ones. They have something in there which damages what they call your apistat, which is your body's way of regulating the fact that it's full and it's had enough. And there's a perfect balance of sugar, salt, and various other chemicals that essentially switch that off. Hence why, when you sit and eat a healthy, nutritious meal, you're pretty satisfied afterwards. But you can gorge on crisps, on sweets, on chocolate, on soft drinks, on all this crap. You can gorge on that until you can barely move. You're that bloated. And it's because that regulator that your body has of, I've had enough now, I've got my nutrients, I'm done, it just effectively gets switched off by this stuff. Hence why, how many people have become hideously overweight to the point of health issues eating fruit, vegetables, meat and dairy? I guarantee very, very few. And we're gonna touch now on a film that we made on the channel, didn't we, last year, called Body of Evidence, where we had a former food advisor at Coca-Cola.
Well, he was a marketer.
Callie Means.
Yeah, he was on the film. Marketing. Just quickly, when you were talking about that perfect concoction of percentages of fats and sugars to basically trick the body, that's perfectly exampled in Pringles.
Yeah, Pringles. Once
Pringles
you
hit
pop,
it
you
on the
can't stop.
bun, and they use that tagline, don't they? Once you pop, you can't stop, and they're telling you there's a reason for it. You know, people that are so addicted to that. I've seen people eat tennis balls thinking they're Pringles.
Look at a Pringle under a microscope as well, and you'll never eat one again.
Right. So Cali Means, basically, the story broke actually. I think Tucker Carlson broke it on Fox.
Yep.
So that's how long ago it was. But obviously, being Fox, it's a 3-minute interview,
And it's a softball question.
Yeah, if you're lucky. We then were privileged enough to have Callie come on to the Right Now show when I was presenting that, and we did like a 20-minute, half-an-hour interview, and then he appeared in Body of Evidence, which was a documentary we made about, you know, obesity and health. Now, what he was saying was when he was working for Coca Cola as a marketer, he saw lots of things that he didn't like, and because he's got a moral compass and because he's got kids, he blew the whistle on it. Now, one of the things was the lobby groups within the food industry, within the food and drink industry in the United States. They're basically working hand in hand with the pharmaceutical industry because they're both lobbying the FDA. So the FDA will allow things to come to market which they shouldn't, which make people sick, which the pharmaceutical industry then picks up as a customer, essentially. So it's like this one big scam. Now, a horrific example he was giving was of 3 women, I think in Alabama, somewhere in the southern states, who were campaigning to get Coca Cola taken out of their primary school, their kindergarten, because obviously it's horrendous for everyone, but it's particularly horrendous for kids who are developing. And so these 3 mothers had basically, you know, don't mess with mothers, basically.
No, don't.
They'd organised and they'd got lots of people in support to basically have it, you know, taken out of the not just their school, but the schools in you know, in the state. It was quite a big thing for Coca Cola. So Coca Cola then donated, I think it was Callie said that was something like $2 million to a civil rights charity.
Yep.
So that civil rights charity would attack these 3 women as being racist. So basically, it would you know, demonize them as a character and as a person, and it would stop other people like school boards wanting to have, or school districts wanting to have anything to do with them, and therefore it would basically put a kosh in having Coca-Cola taken out the school. I mean, these are deeply dark and sinister people.
They are. Wasn't it Margaret Thatcher that said once they attack you personally, it's because they have no political argument? Well, you could apply that logic there. If they're attacking them for being on being racist, when I'm 99.9% sure they're not, or on various different character assassinations, it's because they can't have a go at their actual argument, which is that these products should be nowhere near children. You know, I don't want a nanny state. I'm sure you don't as well.
No.
Whereas as an adult, if you are having, you know, the right to make your own decisions, but that's made based on an informed basis, you know the facts on both sides, and then you still make that decision, like adults do these days that smoke. Everyone that smokes knows it's bad for them, and if they choose to do it anyway, that's their decision, in my opinion. Yep. Same with alcohol, same with loads of things. You know, jumping out of a plane with a parachute that might not open. Well, it might not. That's a decision, but you know the facts, you know the risks, you know all of that. With this, you don't, because you're not told them. And as Gaz points out there, you've got the companies that are making the food that are meant to be regulated by the FDA, and then you've got the pharmaceutical companies. Those 3 people should be the most intertwined organizations you could possibly imagine. There should be no conflicts of interest. There should be no crossover of people. There should be no jumping from one company to the other, X, Y, and Z. There should be none of it. Yeah. But there's tons of it. And, you know, it's a great business model. You create a customer for life by creating this addiction on this toxic food. That then causes health issues. They then go to the drug companies, take these drugs for the rest of your life, whether that's for things that we're seeing explode as a result, like diabetes, heart disease, various other things, ADHD and other childhood-related behavioural issues, which definitely is impacted by a high sugar diet and all these toxic E numbers and chemicals in food. It's a business model, essentially. And, you know, we are at the bottom of that food chain when it comes to the priorities they care about. They don't care about us. We're just essentially lambs to the slaughter for them. And this is why, as I mentioned earlier, it's never been more important to know where your food's coming from. It's never been more important to take control of your own health. And I think it's the easiest place for us to start, because you know, lots was spoken about in 2020, 2021, 2022 about, you know, the right to choose what goes into your body. There was marches in the streets. There was, you know, so much pressure to reverse, you know, mandates and forcing people to put vaccines they didn't want. Well, what's the point in doing all of that and then going having a Coke and a McDonald's on the way home. That makes no sense, because you've got that, body autonomy that you decide, but what are we doing with that decision? You know that they want you toxic. They know you want you chronically inflamed, overweight, sick, full of E-numbers, addicted to pharmaceutical medications and highly processed foods. That's why there's no safety regulations. That's why, as well, what is considered healthy food is all of a sudden insanely expensive. That's why highly processed food is cheap as chips. You go and get a Coke versus a bottle of water, they're the same price. That's just insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I believe in freedom. So, if you want to go and eat McDonald's and have your Coke, fill your boots, whatever. I don't get it, but fill your boots, mate. If you've had 10 pints on a Friday night and you wake up in the morning Saturday and you do a bottle of Coke and a pack of chipsticks, whatever, I ain't going to judge. My bit of judgment comes when it comes to children, especially if I see like an obese toddler, because that kid's not doing the shopping and that kid's not doing the cooking. So that's coming from the parent, and that upsets me when I see that. If I see someone who's overweight and unhealthy in the street and they're in their 40s, 50s, okay, I feel for them, but I don't judge them, because whatever, it's your life, dude. I can't say let me be free and then say you shouldn't do that. You do what you like. But when it comes to kids, I find that very strange that happens, and I think we should serve our children better, to be honest.
We should, and I think what ties into this is the whole concept of, if you know this information, whether it be about health, whether it be about political manipulation, whatever it is, we need to lead by example. We need to embody the life and the attitude and the philosophy that we want the world to be. If we want a world of love and peace and health, of tranquility, happiness, then we need to embody that ourselves. It's no good shouting, screaming, hollering, and being that aggressive person. It's also no good eating toxic rubbish, feeding that toxic rubbish to our kids, if we want a world where all these chronic illnesses are on the decline, a world where people are able to do things till later in life. They're not, I can't go and play football anymore. I'm 40 now. I'm crocked. That shouldn't be how life should be.
Oh, I feel a bit like that, but that's not to do with food.
If you can do something at 30, I want to be able to do the same thing when I'm 50. I want to be able to play football with my grandkids like I play with my son now. I don't want to accept that life's just going to be a constant decline. And as a result, you take care of yourself. And big thing, just to finish on with what you mentioned there about kids, Gaz. Kids follow examples. They don't follow words, they follow examples. Yeah. Hence why these online influencers, the likes of Andrew Tate and so on, have such an influence on these kids, because they're selling a life that these kids aspire to in a way. It's all fake and it's all rubbish, but they're doing that. That's why there is such an influence there. That's why kids look up to celebrities. That's why kids look up to sports stars, because they see that as a life that they desire. We need to take that opportunity and be that for our own children. If you want your kids to eat well yourself. You want your kids to work out, be in good shape yourself. You want your kids to learn to stand up to authority and stand up in the face of adversity and injustice, you've got to do that yourself. You want your kids to have a understanding of what a happy marriage and happy relationship dynamic looks like, you and your partner have got to do that yourself, because they will follow that example. How many kids grow up in situations where they either grow up with dysfunctional families, or they grow up with parents that don't look after themselves, that will then go and follow the exact same trend in their own lives, and it just becomes a cycle. And we have the opportunity to stop that and be the example to our children that we would have wanted when we were children, and be the example, that inspires them to be the best version of themselves. And I'm sorry if I sound preachy, but I really think that's the duty of a parent. And everyone makes mistakes. I'm not a perfect parent at all. Gaz is not. None of us are. But we're all trying. And I think one of the best ways we can do the best for our kids is to set the example for them and try and inspire them to become the best version of themselves, whether that's their health, whether that's with what they aspire to do with their life, whether that's standing up for themselves, all of those things. And, as you mentioned there, with what you're feeding your kids, if you've got an overweight child, invariably, you're probably going to have an overweight parent, because they're going to have learned that behavior from the parents. If you have parents that look after themselves and are in good shape and take care of their health and treat people nicely, invariably you're going to have kids that follow that same trend. With exceptions, obviously, but invariably the constant is going to be the kids that will look up to their parents. So I guess the moral of the point is, be somebody that your kids would want to look up to in any way that's possible. I think that's the point I was trying to make and rambled around to get to.
I think a lot of it is down to self-respect. If you respect yourself, then your kids will see that, and then they will respect themselves, and you can apply that into anything. Because if you respect yourself, you're going to look after yourself. If you respect yourself, you're going to stand up to injustice. Simple as that.
And also, if you respect yourself, you're in a better place to respect others.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So today's show was brought to you in association with Ape Nutrition, bringing British organic specialist food products onto the supplement market. Head over to apenutrition.co.uk. Use the code ICONICMedia for 10% off the range.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Take care, and you'll be back with Richard tomorrow morning.
Certainly will. See you then.